Good morning, and welcome to worship at the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Shenandoah Valley. Our opening words this morning are by Martha Kirby Capo. As we enter this time together, let us renew both our commitment and our covenant. There are those among us who have endured a loss in the past week. May their hope be uplifted again in this community of faith. May they find here renewed strength. There are those among us who have wrestled with questions that seem to have no answer this past week. May they find sanctuary in this community of faith. There are those among us who have cherished an unexpected joy this past week. May their gladness be celebrated. As we commit to continue our free and responsible search for truth and meaning, may we covenant to honor the many paths that have led us to this, our beloved community.
Hello, everyone. On behalf of the entire congregation, I welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Shenandoah Valley. I am Nancy Tickner, your worship associate for today's service. We gather together with our doubts as well as our convictions, with our fears and our hopes, with our failures and our aspirations, with our sorrows and our joys. Whether you are joining us today for the first time, or you have been a member or friend for many years, we are glad you are with us. Whatever faiths you have known, if any, whatever your background, whoever you are, whomever you love, however you arrived here, you are welcome. Now, as Cal Allen comes forward, let us all say together the words for lighting our chalice. In the light of truth, and in the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, to share. And I invite you to join with me as we say our covenant. Love is the spirit of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. To dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to help our neighbor. To these ends, we covenant one with another. Our speaker today is Reverend Henry Tickner, who was our first called minister at UUCSV from 2003 to 2010. He earned an MDiv degree from Wesley Theological Seminary in Washington, D.C., and was ordained in 2003. In 2018, UUCSB voted to recognize his service to the congregation by naming him Minister Emeritus. Prior to entering the ministry, Reverend Tickner spent 32 years in elementary and secondary education as a teacher, elementary and middle school principal, and central office administrator. He lives in Winchester with me, his wife. He has 2 wonderful adult daughters, 2 great sons-in-law, and 2 precious grandsons, all of whom live in Virginia. Please now join me in a time of silence as we hold in our hearts all those in our nation and around the world who are struggling with ongoing, sometimes unbearable, hardships and losses. Amen and blessed be. Our words of meditation are by Frederick E. Gillis, number 501 from Singing the Living Tradition. Spirit of community in which we share and find strength and common purpose, we turn our minds and hearts toward one another, seeking to bring into our circle of concern all who need our love and support, those who are ill, those who are in pain, either in body or in spirit, those who are lonely, those who have been wronged. We are part of a web of life that makes us one with all humanity, one with all the universe. We are grateful for the miracle of consciousness that we share, the consciousness that gives us the power to remember, to love, to care, and to show compassion. Our words for reflection are by Rainer Maria Rilke. and are translated by Stephen Mitchell. It's number 241 in Lifting Our Voices. Have patience with everything unresolved in your heart and try to love the questions themselves.
As if they were locked rooms or books written in a very foreign language.
Don't search for the answers which could not be given to you now because you would not be able to live them.
And the point is to live everything.
To live the questions now.
Perhaps then, someday far in the future, you will gradually, without even noticing it, live your way into the answer. When one of the other congregants saw the title to my sermon this morning, Shades of Gray, they were very excited because they thought I was going to be talking about the novel of the same name. Sorry to disappoint. Shakespeare wrote, "There is nothing either good nor bad, but thinking makes it so." In the fall of 1993, I began my journey toward becoming a minister. At the time, Nancy and I were still living in our home in Fairfax County and attending our home church, the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Fairfax. Now, not long after I had begun my studies, I was approached by our minister who said that he had been invited by a local Methodist congregation to come to one of their adult Sunday school classes to give a short talk on Unitarian Universalism as part of a series they were calling Meeting Our Religious Neighbors. Clearly, this was something that he didn't want to do, so he asked if I would go in his place, saying words to the effect, "The experience will be good for you." So, go I did. I had prepared a brief history of Unitarian Universalism and hoped to engage the attendees in a conversation about how our faith traditions might be similar and where they clearly differed. In my extended elevator speech, I made the point that unlike many mainstream denominations, I thought that Unitarian Universalists had the capacity to live with a great deal of ambiguity in respect to religious teachings and in our personal lives. We were, in short, comfortable dealing with shades of gray. As Unitarian Universalists, we're comfortable holding two seemingly contradictory ideas in our minds at the same time. After all, to many, even our name is ambiguous. Well, I thought I was doing a really great job, and while they clearly disagreed with me about our positions on many social issues, I thought that they would appreciate my comments on uncertainty. Well, I thought wrong. As I finished up my talk, I concluded with something to the effect that my chosen faith makes it possible for me to live a life that is colored with ambiguity rather than with certainty. Suddenly, a person in the front row slammed their hand on their desk, stood up, and announced for all to hear that they couldn't possibly live such a life, and walked out of the room. Needless to say, our gathering quickly broke up. They went to their own Sunday service, and I too went back to worship at my own home church. I tell this story not to make fun of the person who reacted so strongly, but because it made me ponder the role of ambiguity in my daily life and the ways my UU faith support this approach to living. So what is ambiguity exactly, and why does it have such a profound impact on our lives? Ambiguity is, in short, simply a fancy word for uncertainty. It is the idea that the world doesn't exist in black and white, and that there can be different interpretations, different meanings, and different views on the same subject. I'm sure that at some point in each of our lives, we've had a conversation with someone who holds absolute certainty about how the universe was created, when it was created, where we come from, and why we are here. And often, these same people will let us know that if we don't agree with their view of absolute reality, we can expect to spend eternity in other places. Or the person who is staunchly on the pro-life side, but then also supports the death penalty. It's almost impossible to convince them that their views may be contradictory. Questioning the nature of the big, infinite unknown of things, again, who we are, why we are here, what is our purpose, and what happens when we die, can be exhilarating conversations for some, but utter nonsense to others. Peacefully sharing our ideas and experiences with each other over a glass of wine or a cup of tea creates openings in our psyche. And these openings are the ground for greater realization and deeper and more authentic spiritual connection and experience, which transcends any story we may hold about our existence. Now, I wish we could enjoy this level of conversation on a national scope. There is so much distrust between the various tribes that this kind of conversation today is almost impossible. The notion of having to be right and proving others wrong and imposing our rightness on those who believe we are wrong seems to be becoming the norm rather than the exception. Now, it's a human reaction to want to make sense out of events in our lives. We not only want, but need life's unexpected moments to have a deeper meaning. The longer I live, the more I am taught the same lesson over and over by wildly different circumstances. The more I expect the unexpected, the more I revel with life's tragedies and revel in life's joys and victories, and the more I accept the reality that I am not in charge and cannot plan my life as I might like, the more I can fully experience and even come to enjoy the challenge of living in this ambiguous world. Today, we are living through one of the greatest public health concerns in our nation's history, the COVID-19 pandemic. As we confront the many unknowns of the coronavirus pandemic, all of us are facing desperately difficult decisions. When is it safe to go back to work? When can I reopen my business? When can I eat in a restaurant once again? When can I see family and friends? When can I meet with coworkers? When can I travel? What level of risk am I prepared to tolerate? And most importantly, the big question for all of us, when will this be over? The way we answer these questions has momentous implications for our health as individuals and for the health of our communities. Emily Oster, a professor of economics at Brown University, writes a newsletter for parents, but she often writes for a broader audience. In a recent newsletter, she poses this question: when will COVID be over? She reflects how in March of 2020, we were asking if it would be over in April. In April, it was May, and so on and so forth. And now we understand that the true answer to this question is maybe never. and maybe never is certainly an answer no one wants to hear. But next she explores what COVID being over might mean to various individuals. Does it mean a return to the way of life we knew in the fall of 2019? Does it mean when everyone in your household is vaccinated? Does it mean being able to socialize with a bubble of friends who are equally vaccinated and who follow CDC guidelines? Scientifically speaking, just like the more common flu virus, the COVID virus will most likely never be over. It will never truly go away. The pre-2019 world where we had never heard of this plague will never return. In her article, Oster asks this important question: when can I stop obsessing about COVID cases around every choice I make? And her answer to this question is simple: when you decide to. When we begin to make conscious decisions based on risk and reward, we will begin to have a little bit more control over our lives. Not everything we do will be mired in uncertainty, ambiguity, or cognitive dissonance. Oster describes that moving forward has parallels to driving a car. We all take precautions like checking the mirrors, doing up our seatbelts, looking both ways. But we all know that driving a car is inherently risky behavior, a risk we are able to take for the freedom we gain. Taking the recommended steps to protect ourselves from COVID won't guarantee that none of us will get sick, but it may mean a greater sense of freedom about how we go about our daily lives. Living with this degree of ambiguity is challenging, but not impossible. The challenge is to find a way to live with uncertainty, to make the most informed decisions we can, and to modify them when scientific information dictates. In trying to make sense of this world we live in, I believe there are ways our Unitarian Universalist principles and the sources of our living tradition can aid us in getting through these uncertain times. The first source of our living tradition speaks directly of experiencing the transcendent mystery and wonder found in all cultures that moves us toward a renewal of the spirit. From a purely scientific viewpoint, the coronavirus is a mystery and a wonder. From a human perspective, the ability to see our fellow citizens as part of a whole and not as separate tribes or outsiders simply because of how they have responded to the epidemic. Is it a plague? Is it a hoax? Or is it the start of the end times? In the beginning, I used to read accounts of COVID deniers and anti-vaxxers who lost their lives to the epidemic as getting their own just reward. But gradually, I've come to change that opinion to one more sympathetic. In spite of their views, they are mothers, fathers, sisters, and brothers whose passing no doubt left a void in the lives of their loved ones. Our first source of the living tradition reminds me that we need to be open to the forces that create and uphold life. Even in these hard times, my family, my friends, we spend time in nature, and that time has sustained me and fed my spirit. Our second source urges us to be mindful of the words and deeds of prophetic women and men, which challenge us to confront the powers and structures of evil with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love. Who among us would aspire to have been Dr. Fauci for the past 18 months or so. The greater challenge for each of us has to be, how do we hold in our hearts those with whom we so vehemently disagree? How do we determine what is the best path to take? I suggest that our first principle, in which we affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person, is more important now than ever. We may disagree with people, many people. We may fear their behaviors will have a negative impact on our own health and well-being. But as I said earlier, they too are trying to make sense of these terrible times. In writing this sermon, I was reminded of the words of the theologian Howard Thurman that can be found in the back of our gray hymnal, which sums up the ambiguous times we live in with these words: I confess my own inner confusion as I look upon the world. There is food for all. Many are hungry. There are clothes enough for all. Many are in rags. There is room enough for all. Many are crowded. There are none who want war. Preparations for conflict abound all around. He closes, let thy light burn in me, that I may, from this moment on, take effective steps within my own powers to live up to the light and courageously work toward the kind of world I so deeply desire. Indeed, these days, and I'm sure days far into the future, will be filled with ambiguity and conflicting demands. There are days that I'm sure when each of us has struggled to keep from slamming our hand down on that table and simply walking away. There is no doubt that each of us has to develop our own set of coping skills, that each of us has to decide when COVID is over for us. How will we deal with the conflicting opinions with our own families? How will we respond in crowded spaces to individuals who are not masked? How will each of us answer the question, when will COVID be over? So now let me close with words by the Reverend Wayne Arneson. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard, and the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for down deep there is another truth. We are not alone. Amen, and blessed be.
Now, as Henry comes forward, let us say together the words for extinguishing our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of our community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again.
Our closing words this morning are by the Reverend Sarah Moores Campbell. We receive fragments of holiness, glimpses of eternity, brief moments of insight. Let us gather them up for the precious gifts that they are, and renewed by their grace, move boldly into the unknown.
The purpose of the church is to encourage all who gather to grow more generous in spirit and in action. We hope you will consider making an offering after today's service through our webpage, uushenandoah.org, which allows us to exercise that generosity of spirit for this self-supporting church and its many ministries. Thank you for being with us today. We look forward to seeing you soon.